here's a good example, actually, from way back in my teen years when I was very involved in political and social movements. I went to a lecture by Roger Scruton, a British philosopher, a British conservative philosopher. I found very revealing because in public, he seems to be a very religious man, affirms God and talks about God and so on. But in this private audience, he made it very clear that essentially he talked about religion purely because it was useful in controlling the masses. Very much what Marx said about the opium of the masses. It's a way of helping to control them in a way that, not sinister. He thought, in his mind, that's a good thing. But it's a very clear distinction between what he says publicly and what he believes privately. I'm not saying that's true of Greg Egan. I have no idea, but it is a possibility. Or maybe just a sort of ambiguity in his own mind that he's not very sure. It's a good idea to let himself be described that way. Maybe he should put up barriers and distinguish himself from that view. I really don't know, but it has not been my experience that the term is a problem. Nor have I found the term extropy has been a problem. It's more likely to be that people aren't familiar with it, which itself is not necessarily a bad thing, because it gives you a chance. If they say, extropy, what the heck is that?
What the heck is that? Yeah. Well, hey,
it gives you an opportunity to explain. So.
Yeah. Now, just stop for a second here on that point about you don't find the transhumanism to be a put-off, to be a turn-off.
Not the term.
Or the term exactly. But, the WTA is talking about potentially dropping that name. I mean, they're in a rebranding discussion right now, which you must be familiar with. So, where does that come from? Is it because the people think the name is a put-off, or they just think they can do better with something else? Are you familiar with the rebranding process here now that's coming? With
I know it is going along. I haven't really been seeing what's going on with that particularly, but I'm certainly familiar with the discussion. I've seen some of it. I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to be self-critical about labels and contents of ideas. I'm more worried about the contents than the labels. But I think it's a worthwhile discussion, and if something better can be come up with, then that's fine. I actually thought for some time, something around the term Prometheus or Promethean would be good, like the Promethean Institute, for instance, because the mythological character Prometheus, stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humans, is all about progress and has been used as that symbol. But that may have been overused already, so it's very hard to come up with something that is both familiar and yet which doesn't mislead at the same time because of all its connotations historically. But I think it's very worthwhile having these discussions. I'm not sure there will be an improvement on it, or that it will be worth trying to rebrand everything and bring this new term to awareness. But certainly have a go at it, yes.
Okay.
And same thing with life extension. The same question of life extension. Do we use the term life extension? Do we use the term physical immortality, which I don't particularly like? Do we use the term super longevity, which Wired magazine used in an article, which I'm kind of fond of? Maybe because it sounds like a superpower,
right.
Super longevity.
Sure.
But life extension, I think is okay. It's kind of a little dry. Physical immortality, I'm concerned about because it does seem to strictly point to immortality, which I don't think is something we can guarantee at this point. It may be a goal.
No, can't guarantee. Now, that brings me to another point here, just to bring up, is that the Immortality Institute is also going under discussions about whether or not to change its name. And, there's a couple of points here that immortality brings thoughts to many of the general public about kind of cultish, vampire, mystic, some sort of religious type of thing. And also there are quite a few scientists who won't come to the Immortality Institute and participate because of the fact that you just mentioned, as far as immortality can't be guaranteed. It's like if we were the Infinity Institute and our mission was to count to infinity. The Immortality Institute, since it's hardly, you can't ever reach immortality and know that you are there because it's similar to the concept of infinity or forever. So those are two problems that some members have brought up. But what do you think about the name of the Immortality Institute? Since we've been in such discussions about that, and we're talking about the term transhumanism as well here tonight.
It's a big issue. You might come up with something like, for instance, counter immortality. That's not saying immortality, but we don't like the idea of being mortal. But then that sounds, people say, well, it's just a negative term. So it's very difficult to come up with something suitable. There's a similar discussion actually in business. Some business management writers have argued that if you're going to start a company or rebrand a company, you should never use the initial letters. And yet, it doesn't seem to be a big problem for IBM or companies like that. So it's really very hard. There isn't really very good knowledge in this area. It's very hard to test a hypothesis about this. You can do some market research, but it's actually quite hard to do good market research. Focus groups are notoriously very bad at producing accurate answers. There are better ways of doing it. So it's actually interesting.
you said focus groups are notoriously bad at
Yes.
at producing good results.
Yes.
Really?
That's not something that's well known, even among marketers, in fact. But if you look at the research in forecasting methods, people have actually studied what kind of forecasting methods produce useful forecasts. They're forecasting demand for a new product or consumer reaction to a name, for instance. It turns out that focus groups, they can be useful in certain special cases, but in general, they're very flawed because they're prey to all kinds of biases. For instance, if you have someone in a group who is particularly domineering of discussion or charismatic, people will tend to follow what they say rather than producing a real representation of what the group believes. So there are actually a whole bunch of different ways of doing market research that may be more effective. I've actually written a paper on that as part of my paid work.
Oh, okay.
But focus groups that don't work very well. So if you're thinking about doing any kind of market research for the Immortality Institute, I would certainly be happy to make suggestions as to better methods.
Certainly.
To do that.
Yeah, we could use, because many people are worried that, we'll try and choose a name from within the organization, from the members. Everyone's going to come up with a name and vote on a name, but then we also think we should get some outside input as well, market research. So we could certainly use some help. Thanks for the offer, Mr. Moore. Someone has been asking some questions about yourself and the WTA. Now, you're a vice chairman, right, of the WTA?
Honorary vice chairman, yes.
Yes, you are a vice chairman, and
there's some people who try to sort of represent myself as being opposition to WTA because I certainly had some problems. You should also recognize the fact that I was elected to that position with more votes than anybody else for a position early on. So there's no sort of inherent conflict between that, and I've spoken, of course, at 2 or 3 television conferences.
So, right. Okay. So, I mean, you would say, just to resolve these questions between yourself, Extropy, and the WTA, that perhaps there were some disagreements in the past, but things are pretty much going.
Well, no, I wouldn't say they're all in the past. I think they continue to a certain degree. But I think relations are relatively good at this stage. But I wouldn't say they're all in the past.
It's not all in the past, but things are being resolved, you would say?
I think it's promising. Yeah,
okay.
It's promising. I'd like to see, for instance, some more changes in the FAC that I think would make it more balanced. We've had a lot of struggles with James Hughes in particular over that, particularly regarding the political representation. But there's certainly not any kind of real strong opposition there.
All right. I hope that clears up. We had a viewer who was asking about some of the conflict that has been occurring between you and the WTA. But obviously you've spoken at Transvision, you're vice chairman there, and obviously it's something that's being worked on, is what I...
Yeah.
Okay, that's
good. The other thing I would just add to that there's no organizational conflict between the WTA and anything I'm involved in, because we shut down Extropy Institute some time ago because essentially we've been doing that for a long time and had enough of it, really. Wanted to move on to other things, book I'm writing on and so on, other projects. And so many groups had grown up in the meantime, including Immortality Institute and many, many other groups with much of the same agenda or part of the same agenda, that it seemed unnecessary for us to continue doing that. So it wasn't like we felt like we need to fight the WTA to be an organization. That's not the case at all. I'm rather happy that someone else has taken over that.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad that we cleared that up. And yeah, I do want to mention to the audience there tonight that any questions that you have for Dr. Max Moore tonight, please feel free to ask them as we go along here. We've got still a few minutes left for questions. And another thing that I usually ask or allow the guests here is if you have anything upcoming that you would like to promote. You said you're writing a book. Are you going to be also appearing at any public conferences in the near future?
I don't think I have any conferences scheduled right now.
Okay, well then, how about...
from the Second Life, I have a Second Life talk coming up in a couple of weeks.
Second Life. Well, now, will that be within Second Life? Or... Yes,
that will be in Second Life, on the island or land of Extropy. I'm very new Second Life for myself, so I'm still learning by moving my way around. So it'll probably be about 2 or 3 weeks before I appear there.
And what did you say? There's an island of Extropy?
Well, Second Life Transhumanist Island, I think, and there's an area of movement called Extropy.
Oh, okay. And you'll be giving a talk in Second Life there coming up in a couple of weeks, you say?
Yes, yeah. I was going to do it this next weekend, but I figured